Alright, hello everybody and welcome to yet another episode of the JimFear138 podcast. Now this is a re-recording because the last one it was just all over the fucking place. It was kind of horrible. I hadn't had anything to eat before I came home and started drinking and recording, so it very quickly devolved into just scatterbrained horse shit. Which, that's not to say that this one won't be scatterbrained horseshit as well. But I'm hoping to keep that to a minimum, so I actually went out and got something to eat before I came home and started drinking. Anyway, second to last podcast... Third? Yes, third to last podcast of the year. And I'm sorry that I missed the past couple of weeks, but work has just been grinding me down. I was either exhausted or I was working on Enjoy the Decline. Which... that is finally done. And all of the files have been sent off to Old Man Clary. So you will soon be able to get, just in time for Christmas, you'll be able to get yourself or your loved ones a copy of Enjoy the Decline by Aaron Clary, which is a very good book. And I had a lot of fun recording it. It's the book that got me hooked on Aaron's work, to be honest. So I highly recommend everybody just go out and buy that. Get the audiobook if you want, whichever you prefer. It's now going to be out in audio, so woohoo. All you audiobooophiles like me will be able to sit there and listen to it while you perform mind-numbing tasks for your boss. But if you want to get it in paperback, he has it in paperback. It's also on Kindle, so go check that out. And everybody should read this book. Everybody should read this book. It's great. There's a wealth of good information in it. It's about accepting and dealing with the death of the United States. So, the United States is a society on the decline. Hopefully, with the election of the God Emperor, we'll be able to stave this off a little bit in certain areas. He's fucking up in others. I'm not exactly happy about everything that Trump's been doing lately. For example, Rex Tillerson is his Secretary of State. The guy's the head of ExxonMobil. He's the CEO of ExxonMobil. What the fuck is up with that? We've never heard of this guy. We have no idea what kind of qualifications he has. And apparently he's friendly with Putin. Which, I'm okay with having, a cold, understated friendship with Putin. Okay, we're not fighting, right? Alright, just wanted to make sure. We're still doing espionage shit on the down low, but we're not about to go to war anymore. Alright. Got my eye on you, rusky bastard. Now pass the vodka. And then he tries to knife you halfway through the night when you're really good and drunk, but you catch him, and then you both have a really good laugh, and you go back to drinking and singing Russian marching songs, because those are the only songs that Putin knows. But yeah, I'm not exactly happy about Tillerson. I'm not exactly happy about, I can't remember the cunt's name right now. But, the guy he got for Treasury, I believe it was Treasury. It was something to do with fiscal policy. The guy's, he worked at Goldman Sachs. Meanwhile, everybody was, absolutely lambasting, Ted Cruz's wife for her past history, of employment at her past history. Her history of employment at Goldman Sachs. And then he turns around and puts this guy who's apparently also got connections to Soros. He's a Democrat in, Treasury Secretary. It's just, what the fuck are you doing, dude? The rest of the appointments, I haven't heard too many bad things about. Most of the guys he's appointing to, in the EPA, or the, not the EPA, fuck. I don't remember. I would have to look up a list right now, and I can't be fucked to do that, but he's putting a lot of guys in charge of organizations that have been a drain on the economy and the government for too fucking long. And most of the guys that he's putting in charge of these organizations are completely antithetical to what they want to do, and they want to tear him down. The Secretary of Education wants to dismantle public schooling, I think. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've heard anything about that guy. But no, this looks like it's shaping up to be a mixed bag. And Trump watches the news way too fucking much. He watches 5 TV shows, and then he tweets about it, and then the company that he tweets about, their stock just fucking tanks. He needs to stop. He needs to stop watching the television. It's all fake news anyway, so why does he give a fuck? But anyway, I did not want to talk about Donald Trump this time. I just kind of got into it, what with the discussion of Enjoy the Decline. So go and pick that book up. If you're worried about the way that the country is going, or it's going to go, if you're uncertain, it'll give you some much needed peace of mind and help you to achieve that peace of mind, not just, tell you everything's going to be okay. It's brutally honest. It can be depressing at times, but coming out the other side, you will be a better person who is better equipped to handle what's going to happen in the future. So, there's actually a little bit of Buddhist philosophy in there. It's very similar. So if you want to go, if you want to assuage your fears or your frustrations, go get Enjoy the Decline. I'm coming out in audiobook soon. I will notify you guys when it has finally come out. So, on to this thing that I found. Now, Strange Horizons is a magazine kind of like Clark's World. They have an actual magazine, and they have a podcast, and I listen to the podcast off and on. They don't really usually have a lot of stories that I care about, but every now and again there'll be a good one. And they haven't pulled anything egregious enough to make me, fucking cut ties yet. There's always a chance. But I also follow these guys on Twitter. So, they have this article up. It's a review of Old Venus, edited by George R.R. Martin and Gardner Dozois. Dozois? I have no idea how to fucking pronounce that name. Speak English! God damn it! It's fucking 2016, people. Why aren't we all speaking fucking American yet? Funny French names and shit. Anyway, so apparently the book is a bunch of science fiction stories that go back to the old conception of Venus. Well, I'll just read this. We'll go through part of the article here. In his introduction to this short story collection, Gardner, I'm not trying to pronounce your last name anymore because I'm going to butcher it, states that in creating the book, he and co-editor George Martin were hoping to rekindle the wonderful, gorgeously colored dream of old Venus. Gardner outlines the early scientific understanding of Venus and the fictional stories that were based on it. Many of these, he notes, featured hot, sticky Venusian swamps, dinosaur-like predators, amphibious Venusian natives, and a spaceport. He observes, however, that the Venus bubble burst on 14 December 1962, when the American Mariner 2 probe passed over the planet. The probe established that Venus was so hot, around 863 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm not even going to try and convert that to Celsius, you Celsius people out there can do that on your own, that it was completely hostile to life. And in addition, the cloud cover was not made up of water vapor, but sulfuric acid. Wow, I did not know that. Turns out Venus is a little bit less like home than I thought it would be. Following these discoveries, people stopped writing stories based on an inhabitable prehistoric Earth-style planet. Eventually, a few new Venus stories started to appear based on the new reality, but here, and as with their previous Old Mars book from 2013, Gardner and Martin thought it would be fun to return to the earlier imagined world. 16 authors, including several very well-known ones such as Paul McAuley, David Brin, and Joe Haldeman, have contributed stories to Old Venus, and although varied in style and theme, most of the entries are satisfying vignettes from an alternative world. Old Venus is a playground for an author to fill with imagination as the only limiting factor. The recipe might read something like this. Take a hot, humid atmosphere with incessant rain, constant cloud cover, extensive oceans, and possibly some land or floating islands. Add some exotic flora and fauna, and include one or more indigenous sentient races. Into this melting pot, introduce one or more humans, visitors, or residents. They might be soldiers or adventurers, scientists or explorers, old or young, male or female. Include a smattering of plot devices such as a rescue mission, slavery, clones, politics, such as American Russian, human alien, or even alien alien, fierce local monsters, a talisman, a shuttle crash, an ambush, or a battle, or even a love story. Stir well, and most importantly, savor the resulting mix. I certainly did. And that's from the author, Linda Wilson, the author of this review. So yeah, this sounds really fucking cool. I'm not exactly excited about George R.R. Martin being attached to it because I've got a bit of a grudge against Mr. Martin. And this, to me, is just kind of proof that he's doing everything but finishing Game of Thrones. Which is one of the reasons that I haven't fucking touched the books yet, and I haven't watched the TV show. I don't give a fuck. When it's finished, when it is done, then I will pick it up. But if he doesn't finish it before he dies, I'm just not gonna fucking read it. It's gonna be a waste of fucking time, because it's gonna be like the stories that, you know, Christopher Tolkien wrote based on his dad's notes. You know, the Middle-earth stories and shit like that. The worst offender was Children of Húrin. Now, I'm sure that Christopher Tolkien is a perfectly serviceable author in his own right. But with that one, it was so painful to read. Because you could tell that, you know, they said that in the beginning of the book that that J.R.R. Tolkien had taken notes, and he had sketched out scenes and actually written parts of the book out of sequence. And his son basically took all of this and learned as much as he could about the story and then filled in the gaps. And it's painfully obvious what is Tolkien and what is his son. Or Brian Herbert continuing on the Dune series after Frank Herbert died. You know, the only one that I've read, and I didn't even finish it, honestly, it didn't grab me near as much as any of the Dune books did, was the Butlerian Jihad, when the machines tried to take over. And it was an interesting story, and, you know, I didn't really expect it to go the way that it did, but it just didn't have the same flavor as Dune. It took place in the same universe and everything like that, but it was like Dune fan fiction rather than, you know, a Dune novel. I don't know what the fucking deal was. But this right here is one of my favorite types of science fiction. It's back when nobody knew jack fucking nothing about the solar system or the planets in it or, you know, any of this shit. Space was a big fucking playground, and we knew there were planets up there, and we kind of knew what they looked like, but we didn't really know what was on them. So you could just imagine whatever the fuck you wanted. Like the old Venus, quote unquote, as they put it here, is one of my favorite story settings ever. I absolutely love it. It's just, it's like prehistoric Earth, but it's also an alien planet. So you get to play around with all of these alien races, and, you know, the setting, and you get to have dinosaur-like creatures, but they're not dinosaurs as they evolved on Earth. So you get to just make shit up out of whole cloth. And reading what writers did with that blank canvas, essentially blank canvas. You know, they had like a little outline of some things, but most of it's blank, is one of the funnest things about old school science fiction. Just that limitless imagination that these guys had. And even though, yes, it's all scientifically irrelevant now, you know, it's all completely wrong scientifically, that doesn't really matter to me, because I've read enough stories about alternate universes and things like that, like just Michael Moorcock alone, just his body of work that I've gone through is enough to put me in a mood where I can just headcanon this as an alternate universe. And boom, story's fixed, science doesn't matter anymore. It's not our science, it's their science. This isn't our Venus, it's their Venus. You know what I mean? That kind of how little things will be different in each universe. Like, it's similar enough, but you get one universe over, and there's a deviation that's kind of significant, and you can make a story out of that deviation, and then you take that universe as your starting point and move one over, and then there's another deviation from that universe until eventually you get to, I don't know, Tamriel, or something like that. Or the Young Kingdoms, or Atlantis, or what the fuck ever. So it's just one of those things. It's like with all those stories that supposedly took place in, you know, the 2000s and shit like that. This isn't our 2000s. Our 2000s is cool, but it's kind of shitty. We did have Nickelback. But their 2000s has flying cars and, you know, shit like that, and robots and androids and triple-breasted hookers and all the cool shit about science fiction. So I get the feeling that if you're able to approach these stories in this book with that kind of attitude to your analysis or your reading of it, then it's just as much fun as reading it back when nobody knew shit about Venus. You know, so I'm kind of wanting to pick this one up. Do they have a link to it? I'll put this on my fucking Amazon wish list right now. And we'll did you not link it? How are you gonna not link the book that you're... Oh, there, well, you have to click on the picture. You have to click on the picture. Okay. How is the Kindle more expensive than the paperback? Oh, they have it in Audible, too. Let me see. Can we get it, Can we get the Kindle version, or the Audible version cheaper? If we get the... Nah. Well, sometimes they'll do deals, where if you buy the Kindle version, then you get the Audible version, you know, for a reduced price. Like, they'll do sales on both of them across both sites. So you'll pay, like, $2 for the Kindle version of the book, and then like $5 for the Audible, which, you know, for a thing like that, this thing is almost $40 fucking dollars if you're not a member. If you're a member, it's like $27. But I'm not gonna buy that right now. I'm gonna add that to my wish list, and maybe I'll get that next paycheck. But that does look really fucking cool. I really like the cover on this. I'll put a link to it down in the description so you guys can go over and check this out, because this might be something that some of you guys will be interested in if you're into that old school sci-fi shit. And speaking of old school sci-fi shit, I really do want to thank Alexander over at Kirsova for introducing me to Jack Vance. Thank you, dude. I owe you one. I really do fucking owe you one, man, because I've picked up the audiobook for Planet of Adventure. Like, he told me about The Grey Prince and Planet of Adventure and The Dying Earth. And The Dying Earth is the fantasy story. I think The Grey Prince is fantasy, but Planet of Adventure is a science fiction book. And so I ordered The Grey Prince, because you can only get that one in paperback. It's only used. It's out of print. So if you can find a copy of that, go find a copy of that. I guess. I haven't read it yet, but from what I hear, it's very fucking good, and it inspired the Dunmer in the Elder Scrolls games. So that was all the encouragement I needed to go and pick up that particular book. But I haven't had time to read it yet, because I'm still working my way through Netherial, and I've had a lot of audio work and shit to do, so I haven't had time to actually sit down and read. But that aside, Planet of Adventure is what I've been reading lately. And Planet of Adventure is 4 books. It's a tetralogy, I guess, is the word for it, by Jack Vance. And the books are City of the Chosh, Servants of the Wonk, The Dirter, and The Noom. And I don't know how this dude wrote this shit, but it flows so fucking well. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of hard to get into this story because it moves really, really, really fucking fast. Like, when I think of pulp, when someone says pulp to me, and, you know, I get this conception in my mind of a story and, you know, the general idea of how the story should flow and how it should be set up and how the world should feel, and Planet of Adventure hits all of my benchmarks for what a pulp story is supposed to be. Planet of Adventure is like the perfect pulp story, in my opinion. And just to give you an idea of how fast this fucking story moves, there's like 5 or 8 people on this spaceship, and they're circling this star because they heard these radio signals. They picked up radio signals at Earth that had been beamed out from this star, and the radio signals eventually stopped, so they decided to send somebody out there to go find out what the fuck's happening. So they send this team, and they get to the planet, and they're like, all right, well, it's kind of an Earth-like planet. We'll send the scouts down, and we'll see what happens. And as soon as the scout boat leaves the main starship, the starship gets hit with a missile, and everybody dies. This is the prologue This is like 4 pages into this book. Everybody is dead except for these 2 scouts. And then chapter 1 starts up, and like 4 or 5 pages into chapter 1, one of the scouts gets his fucking head cut off by a native. Just gone. He's dead. Bye. Peace. You're the last Earthman on Chai, which is the name of the planet. You know, you're the last Earthman on this planet. Have fun. Toodles. Peace. Good luck. So that's how fast this story moves, and it doesn't let up for a fucking second. It just barrels on, and you better hope that you have a tight fucking grip, because it will leave you behind. I got left behind by this story, and I had to go back and re-listen to like 5 chapters because I'd been listening to them at work, and I had been having to man the register and shit like that, and I couldn't concentrate on the story as fully as I wanted to, so I was lost. I would be listening to one part, and it's like, okay, they're in this village, and they're talking about this. Okay, fine. I pick up. You know, I've got a couple of seconds. Okay, here's your change, and blah blah blah. You know, have a good one. And then I would go back to listening to the story, and they're like halfway across the fucking continent, and I had no idea what the fuck had happened. And this happened a lot because this story moves very quickly. So I just had to go back 3 or 4 chapters and just start listening again when I actually, had time to sit there and listen to the story. But all in all, it's a very good story. This is some classic science fiction right here. Like I said, this is the essence of pulp to me. And it really does turn my conception of science fiction on its head. To be honest, it feels a lot more like a fantasy story to me, because it just takes place on this one planet. That's it. Like, these guys go to Chai, and the rest of the story is on Chai. And it's about this guy, Reith is his name, Reith. It's about Reith trying to exist on Chai without dying, basically. That's kind of the general thrust of the story. He's trying to get back to Earth and warn them about what's going on this planet, because there are aliens here who have, space flight. They would be able to come to Earth, and they probably did come to Earth because there are humans here. So that's his theory, is that Earth is the original planet that men came from, and one of the alien races, like probably the Dirter or the Wonk, had kidnapped men from Earth way, 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 way back in the day, and brought them to Chai, and started using them as a slave species. And then, humans, I guess, escaped or whatever, and then became the various different types of human life and culture that you see on Chai. There's Wonkmen, there's Dirtermen, there's Choshmen, and then there's all kinds of various different human tribes with their own customs and, their own ways of doing things, and it's very, very interesting, very in-depth setting. The setting is just as dense as The Lord of the Rings, but Vance didn't go into as much detail with Chai as Tolkien did with Middle-earth. Like, Vance acknowledges that all of these different alien races have their own languages and their own writing systems and all of that shit. He couldn't be fucked to actually figure all that shit out. He didn't write it all down. He didn't puzzle out languages and shit like that. They got their own language. They got their own writing. That's all you need to fucking know. If it comes up, it comes up, but they're not, it's not need to know information. So we're not gonna waste fucking time on it. And that's another thing that I really like about this fucking story, is there is absolutely 0% body fat on this story. 0. There is nothing in this story. There is not a word, not a period, not a comma that is not need to know information. Everything about this story, everything that happens, every word that gets spoken, every single line of prose is need to know information. So you might want to pick this one up in paperback. Just saying. It'd be a lot easier to keep up if I had to read every single word rather than listening to somebody where my attention could be divided. Because having divided attention with this story is going to cost you plot. It's going to cost you plot. But all in all, I highly, highly fucking recommend this one. It's very impressive to me that he took this, and like I said, it feels more like a fantasy story, because all of my conceptions of science fiction up until this point have been, okay, there's planets out there, unless it's just like a really tightly focused movie, in which case, you know, it's understandable, like and it's mostly the old school shit that does this. Fuck, what's the name of the goddamn movie? Okay, I managed to find a list of movies that take place on Venus. Let's see. No, not Space Odyssey. Or am I thinking? Motherfucker. Maybe it was First Spaceship on Venus. Yeah, it was. It was First Spaceship on Venus. Something like that, where you can actually find this movie on YouTube. There are several versions of it. But it's this very tightly focused movie where it just concentrates on this exploratory mission to Venus. Most other science fiction that I know of, stuff like Star Wars or Warhammer 40k, stuff like that, it's very sprawling. There's this huge setting with innumerable planets, and you can just make up whatever bugfuck crazy shit you want and put it on this planet, and that's the planet of the crazy bugfuck shit. And there's the other planet of the, you know, whatever. There's the planet of the Amazons, and then there's the planet of the gay male pregnant dog fuckers or whatever. You know, you can put whatever you want on these planets. And it's this huge story that takes place in this gigantic galaxy where anything could happen. And very rarely do I come across a science fiction story that's this very tightly focused thing about this one planet. And incredibly, even more rarely, have I come across something like this. This being Planet of Adventure. Because the setting, the planet, Chai, is so amazingly dense. It's so incredibly fucking dense with different cultures and different races. There's fucking 3 types of Chosh on Chai. There's 3. There's the green Chosh, the blue Chosh, and the old Chosh. And they're all completely distinct, and they war with each other. Which is not something that you see, like in Babylon 5. You know, all of the alien races, like, fuck, I'm gonna have to look them up now. Okay, we have the Shadow and the Centauri, the Vorlon, the Brakiri, Arnassian, Stribe, and Narn. All of these races have their shit together. They're all one unified block. They're this gestalt entity that is the Narn. You know what I mean? Or in Star Wars, like the Wookiees. Or in Warhammer 40k, there's the Tyranids, and there's the Necrons, and there's the humans, and there's the Chaos guys. And all of that shit. It's just this gestalt block, and these are these guys, and they never intermingle with the other guys. They fucking hate the other guys, and there's gonna be war if they meet the other guys. And, you know, to put a race onto a planet and divide it up 3 ways with completely different physiological characteristics and completely different ways of going about civilization is something that I really just have not encountered before. Like, you go to Kashyyyk, and there's not like 3 different types of Wookiees running. There's not like the civilized Wookiees, and there's not the barbarian Wookiees. They're all just Wookiees, and they live in the trees. They live in the forest. That's it. They're Wookiees. You know, you can learn everything you need to know about Wookiees in a day. You know, with the Chosh on Chai, you are going to need months to learn everything that you're going to need to know about the blue Chosh, and then the green Chosh, and then the old Chosh, and then you have the Dirter, and then you have the Wonk, and then you have, you know, the Kath, you know, the people who live, the Yao who live in Kath. It's just absolutely fucking mind-blowing that there's so much, to use a buzzword, diversity on this planet. And it really does feel more like a fantasy novel than a science fiction novel, which is, I guess, why I'm so fucking enamored with it, because I like sci-fi a lot. But my jam is fantasy. Fantasy is just my shit, dude. I love fantasy. So like I say, a big sci-fi fan, bigger fantasy fan. But this really does feel like a fantasy story in that, you know, like with Morrowind, or just the Elder Scrolls in general. You know, you have all of these different regions, like Daggerfell and the Imperial continent. I want to say, no, it's not Tamriel. Tamriel is the name of the world. Then there's Morrowind, where the Dunmer come from, and the Black Swamp, Argonia. Then you have Elsewhere, which is the fucking laziest name for a country I've ever heard. That tops out Naywan. That tops out Fritz Leiber's Naywan, which if you spell Naywan backwards, it's no-when. Calling your place Elsewhere is just lazy as shit, but I loved it. It was the funniest fucking thing when I figured that out. But there's all of these different races on Tamriel, and they all have their distinct cultures and customs and looks, and they are distinct races. They cannot interbreed. So they're actually different species, not races. Race is just kind of this funny word that we use to differentiate between this shit. But they're different species. They can't interbreed. And that's the way that this goes on Chai in Planet of Adventure. You know, so it's this tightly focused story. Everything is need-to-know information. There's not a drop of fat on it. And the background and setting and all of the shit happening in the background of this story is just so insanely fucking interesting that, you know, he gets to a new place and it's like, no, stop. I want to go explore the market. Okay, I want to go to the library and just read for 5 hours. No, I want to go talk to people. I want to go talk to people who live here. And then, you know, before you can get a real clear picture of what this place looks like, boom, you're on to the next adventure. And it's this fucking awesome, quick-moving tale. I just started The Dirter, so I just finished the first couple of books today. And it really is fucking incredible, dude. And this really kind of brings me to my next point. Before I get there, though, go buy this. Go buy this. I'll put the audiobook isn't all that. I think the guy's name is Elijah Alexander, the narrator. He does a serviceable job. He tries to put on different voices for different characters, and sometimes he does it very well. But he doesn't keep them exactly straight all the time. He gets better as the story goes along, but it's not like Peter Kenny. You know what I mean? Like, Peter Kenny is one of the best voice actors out there. He did the Witcher audiobooks, which you should all also go and get. If for nothing else than his performance. If you're just not interested in The Witcher, but you want to hear some really good voice acting, go buy the Witcher audiobooks. Peter Kenny did a fucking incredible job with them. But you want to talk about the right man for the job. They couldn't have picked anybody better. Those books turned that guy into one of my voice acting heroes. But anyway. The guy does a good job. He's not as bad as Stefan Rudnicki, who has this voice that's kind of like this, but it sounds older and even more tainted by whiskey than my normal voice does. And he always reads in this particular tone of voice, and he never does voices for the characters or anything like that. He just reads like this. And sometimes that does fit the story. Sometimes it's good for him to do that. Like the greatest hitman in the world, or whatever the fuck that story was in, I want to say Lightspeed, maybe it was Nightmare, before I stopped listening to them. It reads really well because there's no dialogue in that story. It's just a story about this hitman on an island, and all of these people, you know, they go to his island and they request that he take someone out for them. And sometimes he kills them. You know, it's a pretty interesting story. But the way that Stefan Rudnicki reads it is acceptable because there's no dialogue in it. It's all prose, 100%. And if he could just read stories that were 100% prose, that would be perfectly fine. That would be great. That would be right in his wheelhouse. Because when you read in the same tone of voice all the time, and you never vary your voice, and you never try to vary your voice at all, you just down a shot of whiskey and read the fucking story, it becomes very hard to differentiate between prose and dialogue, and in dialogue it's difficult to differentiate between different characters unless there's a lot of he said, she said going on, which tends to bog down a story and become very unnecessary at certain points. So let me give you an example. I'm just going to make up a little bit of dialogue in my head, and I'm not going to put any he said, she said shit in it, okay? So, Teddy and Jerry are sitting at the breakfast table, right? And Teddy says, "So what are you going to do today, Jerry?" "I don't know, Teddy. I might go to the store. You know, there's a new comic shop opening down the street, and I'm thinking of doing that. What about you?" "Oh, I don't know. I might go hit up the bar later. You know, go call my girl, see if we can get a little fuck on." You know, it's not easy to differentiate between who's talking when that dialogue goes on for longer than I did. But if you do something like this, "So, Teddy, where are you going to go today? What are you thinking about doing?" I don't know, man. I might go down to see my girl. You know, there's a new comic shop opening down the street. I might go check that out. Maybe go to the bar later. What are you going to do?" "Oh, you know, I was thinking about going and seeing my girl later. Maybe getting some fuck, you know." It's a lot easier to differentiate between those two characters because they have two different voices. You know, and I realized that I fucked up the the dialogue all to hell. But I'm just pulling this shit out of the ether right now, so I'd like to think that that's acceptable. But it's a lot easier to differentiate between two characters that are talking when they have two distinct voices, rather than everything just being read in the same fucking monotone because you can get away with it because you have a good voice. Like, I just don't know how he gets away with it. It's so fucking unprofessional. Maybe he can't do voices. Maybe I'm bagging on the guy and he's basically disabled. He's not a voice actor. He's the voice. It's like, you know, you pay to get Stefan Rudnicki to narrate your novel or voice act for you. You're not paying for a production. You're not paying for a one-man show. You're paying for Stefan Rudnicki to read your fucking thing. You know, he's not going to do voices. He's not going to do all of this fancy shit. He's going to read the fucking story, call it a day, collect his paycheck. Kind of like a Sean Connery. When you hire Sean Connery to be in a movie, you're not hiring Sean Connery because of his amazing acting ability and ability to take on different roles from different parts of the world at any point in time and switch back and forth and method act and all of that shit. You're paying for Sean Connery to be in your fucking movie. And he's going to have the same... He's going to have the same Scottish accent that he always has in every fucking movie because that's the way that Sean Connery fucking talks. You're paying for that guy. You know, the Sean Connery in Finding Forrester is the same Sean Connery from Highlander, is the same Sean Connery from Hunt for Red October, and on and on and on and on and on, back to fucking James Bond. You're paying for Sean Connery to be in your movie, not for Sean Connery to act in your movie. Which I'm not giving Sean Connery shit. Sean Connery is one of my favorite actors, so, you know, he's more than able and willing to do whatever the fuck he wants. And usually it's sufficient, but when you're doing something like an audiobook that's not visual, it kind of helps to put on, at least try to put on a voice to differentiate between the two characters, and there are classes out there that you can take to help you with that. Basically what I'm saying is Stefan Rudnicki should get off his lazy ass and take some voice acting classes. You know, I mean, I know that not everybody is as autistic as I am, and is able to, you know, has been able to do this since childhood and just went around, you know, memorizing movies and doing different voices from different characters in the movie. Like I would do that with Shrek. You know, I had the first Shrek movie fucking memorized back to front, and I could do all of the voices. Except for, well, no, back in the day, that movie came out when I was a kid, so I could probably do Fiona as well. Anyway, I can't do Fiona now. No way in hell. But, I would practice my voices back when I was a kid just because it was fun to put on voices and it made people laugh. You know, now I get paid for it. So let that be a lesson to you, kiddies. Turn your tism into money. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to get to get to with all of this, that I just kind of threw this idea for this general theme of this podcast together after I saw the thing for Old Venus, because I wanted to talk about Jack Vance and Planet of Adventure anyway. But I was like, well, this is really cool, and this is getting back to when science fiction was fun, when it didn't have to get bogged down in mechanics, where you could just go to Venus, and there's fucking dinosaurs and frogmen, and it's the swamp, and there's this sentient ooze that's trying to eat the fucking spaceship, and oh my god! Back when it was fun, when you could do fucking anything in science fiction. And it was plausible because we didn't know as much about the universe as we do now. And I'm not lamenting the fact that we understand more about the universe nowadays. I'm just saying, that shouldn't negate that sense of wonder and the ability to write in that world. Because, the science has proven it wrong. So it's fiction. The operative word is fiction. Science. Fiction! Nigga, it's fucking fake! Do whatever you want! Have fun! For God's sake, don't feel like you have to be constrained by this scientific dogma. And it's not just dogma. Like, I understand that science is supposed to be an accurate description of the way the universe works. Fine. Totally get that, totally agree, 100%. The seeming need or requirement to stick to that accurate description of how our universe works when you're writing fiction that specifically breaks the rules in other places, but oh no, we can't break this rule. We can't break this rule. Just saying, Venus isn't a swamp planet? Okay, I guess we can't write no more swamp Venus stories, everybody. No, there's no jungles on Venus. The air is acid. The clouds are acid. There's like 860 degrees. Nothing can live there. We can't have fun Venus stories anymore. Why not? Why the fuck not? Why did everybody quit writing Venus stories back then? Like, why? Why let that fucking end your fun? You're supposed to be fucking pretending. You're supposed to be making shit up. You're supposed to be having fun. That's the point of speculative fiction. I don't care what the subgenre of speculative fiction it is. If it's science fiction, if it's fantasy, if it's horror, because sometimes it's fun to be scared too. Not like at 3 a.m. when you're the only one in the house and you've been listening to scary stories all night and, you fall asleep with a fucking shotgun in your lap. But when it's daylight outside, it's fun to be scared. But the point of this fiction is to have fun. If it's not fun, if you're not having fun writing it and your readers aren't having fun reading it, then why the fuck are you doing it? Why are you wasting not only your time, but everybody who's going to pick that book up? Why are you wasting their time? Why are you doing this disservice to them if you're not having fun? Because if you're having fun while you're writing it, chances are someone will have fun while they're reading it. And fun is supposed to be the fucking point. Now, I understand, and I totally agree, that there are tons of other reasons to write fiction. Now, I'm not necessarily down with political fiction personally. That shit has its place, and if you want to write political message fiction, go for it, but it's not going to be fun. Like, who here watched Bible Man? Who here watched Bible Man when you were a kid? Was that not the most cringiest shit you have ever put into your eyeballs? Worse than VeggieTales. Because VeggieTales is meant for, 5 to 8-year-olds, I guess, or 3 to 8-year-olds or something like that. Bible Man is meant for, prepubescent kid, 13 and under, or some shit like that. And even then, even they know it's fucking cringeworthy. Because the message means more to these people than having fun with it. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that they had fun on Bible Man. That shit, you just look at it. Just go look up Bible Man on YouTube. I'll almost guarantee it's not still under copyright. Nobody fucking cares. But yeah, it's horrible. It's cringeworthy because the message takes precedent over the fun. So if you want to have your message fiction story, go ahead. But the message should never, in my opinion, go beyond the fun. it should never supersede the fun in importance. There we go. That's it. That's what I was looking for. I can English. So there's plenty of reasons to write a story. Like, you know, Terminator. Terminator's brilliant science fiction. It's also a commentary on, you know, man's, I guess you could call it man's hubris with regard to machines, and eventually we create machines that just decide that we're not necessary, and they just try to kill us all. But you can put all of that aside. You can completely forget that fucking commentary. Well, okay, I can't forget that commentary. Terminator and Terminator 2 left very clear mental scars on me, and now I'm a technophobe from hell. It took my family years to get me to move to a smartphone from a flip phone. Years. And then when I finally got a smartphone, it took them years to get me to upgrade. You know, this last upgrade that I did, I had to upgrade my phone because it wouldn't take the new iOS, and it wouldn't play the Warhammer Age of Sigmar app that had all of the rules and battle scrolls and shit in it. And back then, I was actually able to I had time to go hang out at Games Workshop, so I was looking into getting into Age of Sigmar and shit like that. I still got my Plague Monks and everything like that. I wish I had time to sit there. Like, I can't even go back to the fucking shop until I sit down and actually paint these goddamn models. There's tons of reasons that people write science fiction and fantasy and horror, okay? Tons of reasons. But if the story isn't fun, then what's the point of it? What is the point? Is it supposed to be useful? It can't just be. It's kind of like I was reading something on John C. Wright with a W, Wright with a W. His blog that I want to say PC Bushi linked. It might have been Hook Ott. And if that's not how you pronounce your handles, guys, I'm sorry. I'm going off text here, and I'm too embarrassed to ask. I would rather make an ass out of myself on the podcast mispronouncing your your Twitter handles. But somebody linked this thing by John. Oh no, it wasn't them. It was a conversation that involved them, but somebody else linked it. I can't remember the guy's handle right now. But basically, he brought up, like, what is the point of hobbits? Some guy had written a blog post that was talking about how he could not fathom the Lord of the Rings. It broke down immediately, like, upon scratching the surface of it, because, you know, what's the point of hobbits, and how could all of these different races exist and not be in a state of near constant warfare? And he was like, well, the point of hobbits is that they're supposed to enjoy that pastoral life. They're supposed to be a callback to that idyllic pastoral life where, you know, it's small towns and markets and everybody knows everybody, and there's one ale house in town and everybody goes to it and we all sing songs and have fun and eat good food, and that's the point of hobbits. They're the lighter side of things in the Lord of the Rings. They're meant to be the lighter side of things in the Lord of the Rings, and that's why it's so horrific when you finally go back to Hobbiton at the end of Return of the King, and I want to say Saruman had shown up and enslaved the hobbits and, like, devastated the Shire. It was horrific because these people hadn't done anything to anybody. They were just there, and they got bowled over by this monstrous military-industrial complex that just paved right over them. But just like the hobbits don't need a point other than to be there and to be enjoyable and pleasant, fun people. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror doesn't need a point other than to be enjoyed. It's there specifically to be enjoyed. Now, you can put all kinds of commentary and whatever the fuck you want in your story, but at the end of the day, if it's not an enjoyable experience for you to write and the end user to read, then in my opinion, you have failed. And that's, like I say, that's one of the reasons that I stopped listening to these story podcasts, because the vast majority of these stories were not fun. They just weren't fun. Even the ones that weren't preachy message fiction, they just were boring. just absolutely boring. It's like, okay, well, that's a cool concept, but this story is really slow, and it's not moving anywhere, and there's no point to all of this, and why am I here? Why am I wasting my fucking life listening to this? You know, that's a question that I asked myself on more than one occasion while listening to Lightspeed and Nightmare and Pseudopod and Podcastle and Escape Pod and Clark's World and Strange Horizons. On more than one occasion, I've been listening to those. I would listen to those podcasts and just ask, like, what's the fucking point of this story? Why is it so boring? Who okayed this? Who thought it would be a good idea to not just write this, but print it somewhere where people would have to pay you to read it? How did this enter your head as a good fucking idea? What in the fuck, man? So that's my screed, and that screed will be coming out in a much more well thought out version. I've got a post that I'm working on where I kind of I'm going to tell the story of why I stopped listening to all of these podcasts, and then I'm going to get into the bigger point of what I think the purpose of speculative fiction is, and how these people fail at it, and more importantly, why they fail at it. So that's what I'm currently working on. I've also I came across an article on Twitter about why Christian fiction, Christian speculative fiction in particular, fails to find an audience. It fails to like the audience just isn't fucking there. And a lot of Christian fiction just fails, and these people give up, or they go on to become basically what amounts to secular writers. And you don't have to do that. You really don't. And being an atheist, being someone who was sick to the back teeth of the church and the churches and religion in fucking general, you know, I think that I am in a somewhat unique position to be able to comment on that and kind of help these people out. Because there's no reason that the pool of good speculative fiction, explicitly Christian writers or content producers should be as small as it is. Like, off the top of my head, I can only think of Vox Day, Brian Niemeyer, and Doug TenNapel. Those are the only three explicitly... Well, I mean, there's, of course, older guys like J.R.R. Tolkien and, C.S. Lewis and stuff like that. But, I mean, like, so far as contemporary people go, like, those guys' books are classics, and it does, like, the Christian message in them, if there even is one. With C.S. Lewis, there definitely is, but with Tolkien, it can be argued that that's not really the point. And maybe that is the point. The fact that his stories aren't expressly there to push a Christian worldview. Maybe that is the point. Maybe that's why they're so good and why they speak to such a huge audience. But I don't know. I might tease that, pull that thread a little bit in this letter. But I've also got a book review of Thune's Vision by Schuler Hernstrom, and I've got another Appendix N review of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser coming up, and I'm definitely going to be doing a more well thought out and well worded review of Planet of Adventure, because I believe Jack Vance is on the Appendix N list. Let me see here. Yeah, he is, but it specifically mentions the Eyes of the Overworld and the Dying Earth et al. So I'm guessing that also includes, stuff like Planet of Adventure. So it's not technically on the Appendix N list, but I can probably work it into Appendix N as it's, technically an alumnus of The Dying Earth and The Eyes of the Overworld, because it was written by Jack Vance. So, we can get into finer details and split hairs later. But those are going to be coming up relatively soonish, depending on when I can find time to actually sit down and fucking write the goddamn things. But yeah, I've been going on for about an hour, and my throat is starting to hurt. I've had this fucking sinus infection since the weather changed down here. It doesn't get to be winter down where I live until like halfway through January. like what's fall up north, where it starts getting actually cold. It starts getting into like the 40s and shit like that. That's what it's like down here in December. So we have very mild winters, but it's absolutely shit on my health and my sinuses. I get sick so fucking easy. I've been trying to stave it off by taking multivitamins, but I think I might have to step it up to something harder because I've been having headaches. But anyway, I'm going to soldier on, and I'm going to keep putting out the podcast. Like I said, sorry for missing a couple of weeks, but I was just dead. Like this head cold or this sinus infection or whatever the fuck it is that I have, combined with, you know, what amounts to 62-hour work weeks, including driving time, and all of the audio work that I've had to do, it's just been fucking killing me. So I got a couple of days off, and I just slept. I slept and I played Morrowind, and that was it. I just rested. But all right, guys, I'm out. Thank you all very much for listening. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your finite lives to listen to the ramblings of this here drunken, belligerent asshole. I hope that you all have a good weekend. I hope that your holiday season is going well. Merry Christmas to all of our Christian brothers out there and sisters, and Happy Hanukkah to all of our Jewish brothers and sisters out there. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season, and I hope that you all get what you want for your gifts. So, all right, I'll catch you guys next week. Peace out, everybody.